and we are set to go. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for the June meeting 2025 of the Chicago Integrative Eczema Center. We're so glad everybody's here. And today I'm so excited to introduce Dr. Keira Barr, who's going to be taking us on a journey. Dr. Barr, I'm going to, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to let you tell us a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself. And then I'm going to turn it over to you.
Fantastic. So, hello. I'm so excited to be here. And, I've never been to one of these sessions before. So, I'm hoping this time might be a little bit different um, because we're going to be talking about, eczema as a skin condition. But the invitation is that we're going to go deeper, literally and figuratively, to explore how our bodies, our minds, and our skin are all connected, especially when it comes to stress. My background is that I'm a conventionally trained dermatologist, dermatopathologist, but my own health took a turn about 13 years ago. And my own health started falling apart. It started with my skin, actually, not, I have struggled with eczema different parts of my life, but for me, it was skin cancer that really kicked off my journey. And then there was gut issues, hormone issues, and it really led me down a path of looking for answers. Integrative medicine, functional medicine, Ayurveda, homeopathy, whatever I could get my hands on. And I still wasn't improving. And it wasn't until I landed in mind body medicine that, oh, all the dots really started to connect. And it really started to make sense. I started to make sense. My symptoms started to make sense. And I really started to begin in earnest on my healing journey. And I thought, oh my goodness, if I am a physician who's been in medicine for over 20 years and I didn't know all of this information and how everything connected because we weren't taught that, at least in this way, how is the general population supposed to understand this? So my mission has become to pay that forward. So right now I live kind of at the intersection of skin health and mental health, a field in dermatology called psycho-dermatology. And I practice it in a way that is also different than conventional psychoderm because I am not prescribing drugs, but I am prescribing healing modalities in a sense that really empower you, the individual, to take charge of your own health and well-being, right? That you know what's happening inside of you, and we can take control of the things that are in our control because there's plenty of things, especially in the world right now, that aren't. Um, so that being said, before we kind of dive in, I definitely want to make this an interactive session. I want to name right off the bat, there's no right way to do anything that I'm going to be offering today. There is no one way. We're just here to explore, to share, to experiment with some practices that I'll introduce that support both you and, those that you care about living with atopic dermatitis, because the goal isn't to fix anything, right? This is the invitation here is just to offer insights into how stress affects our skin and to give you some simple practical ways to help ease that tension and support your body's natural healing process. Before we begin, I would love to just know who is here with regards to who here is caring and loving someone living with eczema versus who here is living with eczema themselves, just so I know how to, I guess, talk about, position, offer these practices and tools because it's important, right? When it comes to a chronic skin condition like atopic dermatitis, it can affect the family nervous system just as much as the individual. So I'd love to hear who's here. You can pop it in the chat. You can open up your mic. I'm just curious. Um,
Hi there. I'm
Hi.
hi there. I'm 73 years old and I'm the one with it. And I live largely alone. I have multiple complex diseases, including atopic and contact and stasis dermatitis.
Got it. Thank
Nice to
you.
meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I'm so glad you're here. And Rosemary shared that she's living with it. Thank you. You're living with it too. Okay. And for your son. Okay. Good. Good. All right. Everything that I share, um, will be information that you can apply for yourself as well as for those that you love and care for, right? Um, so I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to go back and forth. Admittedly, I'm not the savviest with technology, especially with this mouse that I am. It's like a struggle with. We are not yet friends. Okay. Can you see the screen? You can see that.
Yep,
Okay,
it's coming through great.
perfect, perfect, perfect. So, and let me just see if I can move that up. Oh, goodness gracious, it's like a workout just with this. Okay. So before we kind of dive in to the material, I always love to invite us just to arrive together into your individual space, into our collective space together, because you probably had a lot going on before we started, or you might have a lot going on after we end. So it's just a nice way to just bring us in to a moment together. Yeah. So the first invitation is just, whether you're seated, whether you're standing, is just to find a position that feels a little bit more comfortable, even if that's just 1% more comfortable. Yeah. And just taking a moment just to settle. And as we begin, I just want to invite you to just take a moment to go inward, whatever that means for you. Inward doesn't require you to close your eyes. You might even just take a moment just to orient to our environment, right? Our collective environment, seeing the faces on the screen. And in fact, I'd actually encourage you to orient away from the screen just for a moment, maybe just looking around your own home environment, and attune to objects, colors, textures that help you feel a little bit more present. Yeah. Or tuning to, maybe that's your internal environment, something inside of you or around you that helps you feel just a little bit more held in this process, right? Of grounding and creating a sense of connection, right? You might even notice what helps you feel a little bit more supported, whether that's your breath, maybe that's the chair or the couch that you're sitting in. Maybe it's something that you can touch and hold, like a blanket or a pillow, right? And knowing that connecting in and of itself is a choice, right? You always get to shift where you focus your attention, right? How much do you connect inward? How much do you connect outward in a way that balances and ultimately helps you feel just a little bit more present, maybe a little bit more open to this experience? And as you call yourself into this present moment, you might notice the parts of you that aren't fully here, right? That are needing to be called in maybe just a little bit more. So as you continue to arrive, just calling the parts of you that maybe aren't fully here, or you don't have to call them here, and just simply acknowledging that not all parts of you want to be here, and that's okay too, right? Acknowledging that sometimes being fully present is hard. It's challenging for all of us, yeah? And maybe you can continue to ask, what would help me be just a little bit more present? And then as we continue to arrive, noticing your mind, there are thoughts swirling around, if it's quiet, maybe noticing your body, any areas of ease, any areas of tension, noticing your breath, whether you're holding your breath or if your breath feels like there's ease and flow, and just allowing yourself to perhaps explore why you're here, right? What is your intention for showing up today? I think our intentions can be profound and they're also open to evolving. So, as you identify maybe why you've showed up to this particular session, what you're hoping to get out of it, knowing that you can write that down or just make a note in your mind, whether those intentions are for you personally as someone living with atopic dermatitis or for someone that you love, right? Or perhaps it's a combination of both, to learn more about the mind skin connection, to learn more about your own nervous system, So I'll just, just take a moment and just open it up to you, right? Like what are you hoping to get out of today's session? Any of that? I'll just stop the share for a sec. Okay, perfect. So Susan wants to hopefully learn some tools. We'll definitely be learning, sharing some tools as we go through our time together today. But if there's anything else, yeah, I know this. Yeah, absolutely. Right. So when we talk about tools, we can talk about reactive tools, things that we can use right on the spot versus proactive. How do we set ourselves up for success when things really get hard, right? Increase our capacity and almost create like a buffer so that no matter what life throws our way, we can handle it with a little bit more ease. So I really appreciate you sharing that. So I'm going to share my screen again, figure out how to do that. And I'll just open it up to the group. I can move my, okay. And invite us to talk about stress. Just for a few minutes, not to stress you out, right? But just having you get really curious about what is your definition of stress? What does stress mean to you? Yeah. And how do you actually know when you are stressed? Many of us, we kind of live at a certain level. We don't even, we're like, no, I'm fine. I'm not stressed. This is how I am, right? But when we stop to actually get really curious, maybe just to notice what does stress feel like in your body, right? As a parent of someone living with eczema, or as someone living with eczema yourself, right? Do you feel it in your shoulders, your jaw, your stomach, right? Do you notice when things are getting a little chaotic in life because of personal obligation, professional obligations? Does that impact your skin? Yeah. So I'm just curious for those who are open to sharing, like, what does stress mean for you? How do you know when you're stressed? So I'll take down my screen and just open it up. Itching himself starts to get agitated. Yeah. Anyone else notice? Like, how do you know when you're stressed? I think a lot of our defaults be like, I'm so stressed, but like, what in your body lets you know that? Is it racing thoughts? Is it a racing heartbeat? Does your breath get shallow? I know that I clench my jaw and my shoulders wind up by my ears. Before I know it, I'm like, I have to consciously push my shoulders down. Yeah. So it may look very different for all of us. But I think it's important. Sleep is disrupted. Yeah, that's a big one for many of us, right? It's sometimes hard to um, turn turn things off. Yeah. Um, and especially at night when things, the noise of the background noise of the day, when we're so busy, we don't have time to think about anything else. And then at nighttime things kind of quiet down and it's like, oh yeah, there's that itch, there's that discomfort, right? We kind of, and then it can kind of snowball. Okay, excellent. All right, thank you for sharing. I'm gonna share my screen again. I just like to be able to see faces. Yeah. um Well, here's the thing, right? The symptoms that we experience, whether that's disruption of sleep, whether that is the itch, whether that's a feeling of anxiety, whether that's heart racing, mind racing, yeah, the symptoms, they're not random, right? They're actually the way that our nervous system is communicating with us. So these symptoms that we experience, whether it's eczema flare-ups, anxiety, or discomfort of any sort, right? They're all signals from our nervous system that are trying to get our attention. So the invitation is to think about this guiding question of what is the nervous system trying to tell me through this symptom? Having difficulty speaking today. So, right, so when we experience symptoms like itching and flares of eczema, it's really a sign that your nervous system is reacting, right? Because the first thing that registers stress in your system isn't your brain, it's your nervous system. And I'm going to go much deeper into this. So the invitation is to get really curious of what is the nervous system trying to tell me through this symptom, right? Eczema, as you well know, living with it or living with someone who lives with it, right? And other skin issues are intimately linked to stress. The body's response to stress shows up in the skin, often as inflammation, irritation, but those symptoms aren't just physical, right? They're messages from our nervous system. They're offering cues, messages inviting us to pay attention. To maybe what is the nervous system trying to communicate underneath the symptom, right? Is it tension? Is it emotional overwhelm, right? Our body does speak through physical sensations, and the invitation is to listen to them. And the process isn't static, it's very dynamic and it's happening continuously in our body. So it's important to understand the nervous system is also responding to emotional and environmental cues as well. As our ultimate barrier between our internal world and our external world, our skin is both it's a stress sensor in many ways. The skin, and I'll dive into this in a little bit, but your skin actually has the same mechanisms as our brain does to react and generate the stress response. Our skin itself can create the same stress hormones and inflammatory signals that our central nervous system does. Our skin actually has this peripheral nervous system. And so the nervous system is going to try and get our attention in any way that it can. It might start off as a whisper, right? But if we ignore it, override it, for example, with anxiety. Anxiety and depression are closely linked to atopic dermatitis, and the whisper could be just a little bit of worry. And if we ignore it or push it aside, it might evolve into feeling that felt sense of anxiety and overwhelm. And if we push it aside and ignore it, it's going to get louder and it could evolve into a full-blown panic attack. Yeah, right? So the signals are going to take more and more extreme action to get our attention because that is the nervous system's job, right? The nervous system's job is to keep us safe. So I'll name that wire deep into our DNA. There is a theme of slowing down, connection, and a felt sense of safety. And it's the felt sense of safety that will override the other two. We will always prioritize in service of our survival as a species, like that a felt sense of safeness versus connection and slowing down, right? This is why oftentimes things we speed up, we hustle, like in all of that. So essentially, I want you to think of your nervous system like your own personal surveillance system, and it's constantly scanning for your environment, both your internal environment and your external environment, for cues of safety or danger. It does this through three different pathways. Let's see if I have it here. Yeah, it picks up cues from three different pathways inside our body, like the sensations of thirst, hunger, worry. Yeah, from our outside environment, our environment, right? The noise that we might hear, our visual environment, the things we're looking at on our phone, on our screens, the news, and the in between in relationship. Yeah. And I think that's a big one. We often don't think about that, but it's the relationships that we have with our loved ones, with coworkers, that can also elicit cues of safety or danger. And all these cues are coming in through a process that Dr. Stephen Porges, the creator of polyvagal theory, he calls it neuroception. And neuroception is happening outside your conscious awareness. You do not have to be thinking about what's safe and what's not safe. Your nervous system is always constantly taking in those cues, the inside, outside, and in between, all the time beneath your radar. Yeah. So when it detects safety, things can calm down, helps you relax. When it detects cues of danger, it's going to activate that stress response. So it's kind of like this equation. I don't know if I have that here. Yeah, when the cues of safety outweigh the cues of danger, right? We can grow, we can stay curious, we can stay present, we can see possibilities, we can see options. But when cues of danger take over, our survival strategies kick in, like fight or flight, right? And we can get stuck in old patterns. So I want to invite you to actually, I have this to remind me to just pause for just a second and just check in if anyone has questions about what I just shared. Or does that kind of make sense? Makes sense. Okay, I'm looking at Marie. You are right in the center of my screen, and that gorgeous smile. I'm just using you as my locus here. You said yes. I'm going to go with yes. So I'm going to keep going. And at any time, please, you can open your mic and stop me. How about that? Because I won't be able to necessarily see the chat. Okay, cool. Um, all right. So what happens, right, is if the cues of safety outweigh the cues of danger, we go down this pathway of connection, right? That deep primordial theme. We can stay connected and held, and we feel safe. If the cues of danger outweigh safety, we're shifting from connection to a state of protection, right? The body is going to do what it needs to do to keep us safe and alive. So I want to name and honor, I'm going to go into this in a little bit more detail, but all the distressing symptoms, the anxiety, the itch, the pain, the discomfort, the sleep disturbances, and all of that are your body's best efforts to keep you safe, to protect you, even if the outcomes are not what we want. So instead of, I would offer a reframe of our body isn't trying to make us miserable and sabotage us. It's really doing its best because it thinks it needs to protect us from something, from the cues that are coming in through the 3 different pathways. Does that make sense? It's, I had, I always thought that my body was like out to get me. Like, why is this happening and all that? When I kind of learned this, understand this concept of the applied polyvagal theory and how our nervous system is wired to really keep us safe. And it's just doing its darndest to do that, um, it helped me have a little bit more compassion towards myself. And my hope is that by sharing this, it gives you a little bit more insight into why the things that are happening are happening. Yeah. So, oh, I'm going to go back. Okay. So, if you think of the nervous system, I'm going to invite you to use your imagination and think of your nervous system like an elevator that has 3 floors. And the elevator knows what floor to go to based on the cues that it's picking up. Yeah. If the nervous system is picking up cues of safety, the elevator is going to go up to the top floor, what one of my clients called the penthouse. This is where we feel safe and secure enough. We feel connected to ourselves and our surroundings. And the need for protection is less. The alarm on the surveillance system can be turned down. It doesn't mean that we're calm all the time. What it means is that we're resourced enough, we can be present to what's happening in connection with it, to be able to ride the waves of the stress activation with a little bit more ease, fluidity, and flexibility. Yeah. If the nervous system picks up cues of danger, whether from inside, outside, or in between, the elevator is going to move to this middle floor. This is where our fight or flight response kicks in. This is this activation of the sympathetic nervous system, mobilizing to take action to protect ourselves, right? This is where our mind might start racing, our heart starts racing. This is where blood is going to start flowing to our heart, our lungs, our muscles to run away from danger, right? This also means that inflammatory signals are going to increase. This is cortisol and our stress hormones are going to increase in service of your survival. So this is where you might see increased itching, acute flares, difficulty sleeping, yeah? If those cues of danger keep coming in and the nervous system is like, oh, this is getting too much, this doesn't feel like we can fight our way out of it, we shift out of survival mode into what we call conservation mode, the elevator moves to the basement, right? This is where things really start to slow down in service of your survival to conserve energy. So instead of feeling anxious and overwhelmed, this is where depression might come into play, where chronic fatigue comes into play, conditions like fibromyalgia, chronicity of our skin conditions, where the body just doesn't have the resources to to be able to truly heal itself. It's expended so much energy or has to conserve energy now just to keep going. Yeah. So looking at this elevator, the goal isn't just to be in the penthouse all the time. That is not what we want. What we want is for that elevator to be able to move with fluidity and flexibility and resilience, to be able to appropriately respond to the cues that are coming in, right? So, because there are times where we do need to be mobilized, we do need to take action. Activation of the sympathetic nervous system is not a bad thing. This is where we get to have the energy we need for play, for creativity. Yeah. Being in the basement, there are blended states as well. Like slowing things down is not a bad thing. This is where we experience, those lazy, comfortable days and intimacy. Yeah. So there are no bad states. The challenge for many of us who struggle with chronic illness and chronic skin conditions is that our elevator is getting stuck between these two floors. We're either hyperactive, hyper aroused or hypo aroused, and the elevator gets stuck. And so the nervous system and the body aren't generating conditions conducive to healing because they're constantly feeling like they're under duress. Okay. So the question is for you is, how do you know what floor you're on, right? So maybe a curiosity is, I'm in the penthouse when I think about people who are important to me, right? Maybe when I'm out in nature, I give myself permission to have agency over my choices, right? Being, with my furry friends or having my feet in the ocean or something as simple as using my favorite mug when I am drinking my favorite beverage. Maybe you recognize that you're in that middle floor when you feel like you're pressed for time or you feel overwhelmed or feel like there aren't a lot of choices. You don't know what to do in order to help yourself when you're feeling really itchy or irritated, right? Or you feel responsible for too many, especially as a caregiver, yeah? Or someone living with eczema and you have to care for others, right? It can feel overwhelming. And maybe you feel like you move to the basement when you feel stuck, when you feel without options, or you don't feel seen, heard, or validated. Yeah. We've all been on all these different floors. And again, there is no wrong state. The invitation is just to get really curious. Maybe where right now is your elevator, right? Are you feeling connected, right? Seeing all these other faces in the community? Or are you feeling a little anxious and activated, or maybe a little numb, maybe a little disconnected and shut down, right? No judgment. It's just getting really curious of getting to know yourself, because when we know what floor we're on, then we know what skills and tools that we might need to support ourselves to get that elevator moving again. Yeah. And this is actually where the vagus nerve comes in. So the vagus nerve, maybe you've heard of it. It is the main communication pathway in the parasympathetic nervous system, right? So the autonomic nervous system has two pathways: that sympathetic, that mobilization, that fight or flight, kind of what we know it most commonly as, and the parasympathetic nervous system, kind of our rest and digest. That parasympathetic nervous system is divided into two pathways: the penthouse, right, that ventral vagal sense of connection, and the dorsal vagal, the shutdown. Yeah. And so when our nervous system is what we call in regulation, things are functioning optimally, there's a gentle oscillation between sympathetic and parasympathetic, kind of like a gas pedal and a brake, right? When you're driving down the road, use a little bit of gas, use a little bit of brake. When we pick up the cues of danger, sometimes there's a gentle tap on the brake. And then when the cues of danger feel overwhelming, there's like slamming on the emergency brake. Yeah. The vagus nerve is a nerve, the longest cranial nerve that extends from our brainstem through our belly, and it is responsible for innervating our inner ear. Their ear is really rich inside as well as all around, rich in vagus nerve fibers. There are branches actually that connect to the facial nerve. So our face is tied, has a connection to the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve also affects our vocal cords. It goes through our lungs, through the diaphragm, into our belly. So the way cardiovascular system, our GI system, intimately tied to the vagus nerve. And what's really important to know about the vagus nerve is that 80% of these vagus nerve fibers are sending information. They're known as sensory fibers. They're sending information from the body to the brain, right? The brain takes that information and then interprets it. And then it's from that interpretation, the information it received from the body, that then tells all the other organ systems that it is responsible for how to function, right? This is really important. This is why, if you've ever been in talk therapy, why talking can be helpful, but has its limitations, right? We really need to bring the body into the equation, what we call a bottom up approach as well as a top down, because if we are not paying attention to what's happening into our body and the information that's being sent from the body to the brain and all the cues, we won't be able to support ourselves and offer the resources that we might need to help all those organ systems to function optimally, to get that elevator to move back up towards the penthouse, which is where we can cultivate conditions for healing. um, does that make sense? I know that's a lot of information, so I'm just going to stop my share for just a second and just check in with anyone just to see if there are questions around all that, because I know that some of that you may be really familiar with and some of it you may not. Okay, I love that, all these thumbs up. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, cool. Um, I will keep going. I will share my screen again. All right. So the question is, what does this really have to do with your skin? Why am I talking about this with regards to atopic dermatitis? Well, the bottom line, it has everything to do with it, right? Because the brain, skin, nervous system, they're all derived from the same layer of embryological tissue, right? They are intimately connected and they are talking to each other all the time. Real-time example. I'm super excited to be with you here today, and this might be a little TMI, but like I'm excited and I'm also nervous. So my pits are a little bit sweaty. My palms are a little bit sweaty. That is like real-time mind-skin communication, yeah? And so beyond this two-way communication between our nervous system and our skin, it actually becomes a four-lane highway in something that we call the NICE network. Our nervous system is also intimately connected with our immune system, right? Our skin and our endocrine or hormone system. These four systems are communicating with each other all the time, with the nervous system as command central with all the cues that are coming in. So it's a nervous system, right? Picks up cues of danger. It is alerting the immune system. It's alerting the endocrine system. It's alerting your skin. We need to go into defense mode, protection mode. Yeah. So inflammatory signals are going to go up, hormones are going to shift, cortisol is going to go up, and that's where sleep disturbances also come in. Cortisol and melatonin, which is one of our body's most potent antioxidants that we produce, rises most preeminently at night. Cortisol is supposed to go down at night while melatonin goes up. But if we are in an activated stress response, that balance can get shifted. Yeah. And so we can experience sleep disruption as well. And the body doesn't have the same opportunity to heal. Importantly to know, yes, the skin is part of this bigger network, but the skin itself, as I mentioned earlier, in and of itself is a neuroimmunoendocrine organ, meaning the skin itself has the capacity to generate stress hormones, sex hormones, inflammatory signaling. Has so many sensory receptors, yeah? So the skin in itself is both a target and a source of the stress response, which is why it can be frustrating, those of you living with atopic dermatitis, but also why the skin is like the loudest billboard of what kind of cues are coming in, and how can we change the communication or offer different cues to the nervous system to help things settle down, right? So it gives us more options. It gives us some more options of how to approach um, our skincare, right? Instead of skincare being something as a corrective routine, it can actually become a reparative relational ritual, right? The relationship between the mind, the skin, and the nervous system, the relationship that we have to our skin and our body, and helping maybe improve the communication between the relationship between all of these different systems. Okay, so I'm going to open it up then. I'm going to stop my share. And again, just welcome any questions, any concerns, anything that anyone's thinking before we actually go into an experiential practice to offer you some things that you can do when you're feeling maybe we want to send our nervous system some safety cues. I think it's really also important to name, because the biggest nerve is sending information from the body to the brain, and that's what's controlling the vast majority of how these systems are all working. We can't just tell ourselves that we're safe, right? We have to show the nervous system, and that's what these practices will invite us to do, right? Because the cues that we can send the nervous system are um, through three different, right? So three different pathways the cues are coming in, but also through three different feedback systems. The first is through our senses: sight, sound, touch, taste. Through what we call proprioception, like where our body is in space. How do we know like where we are? Even if our eyes are closed, we might know our arms are up in the air or they're down by our sides. And also interoception. What is happening inside, right? Are we thirsty? Are we hungry? Are we feeling a little buzzy energy? Are we feeling a sense of ease? So we can leverage all of those different feedback systems through different practices. So if you're open to it, if it's okay with you, I would love to maybe, that was a lot of information that I shared. And we can always, one of my mentors always invited us to like wiggle, squiggle, squirm, and stretch, just to let all of that go. Right? It's kind of just like kind of letting go of whatever came before this so that we can be fully present. And I would invite you, if you're open to it, just to start with some joint rotations. Yeah, maybe just rotating your wrists. I love the thumbs up. Thank you, Kathleen. Maybe just 5 times in one direction. You can close your eyes if that feels available or not. And then just changing directions. And just notice, maybe bring awareness to your breath as you do this. Am I breathing? And then maybe increasing to arm rotations at the elbow. Yeah. Maybe a few times in one direction and then switching directions, right? Sometimes we think of our body and our parts as separate from each other. Moving those rotations maybe as much or as little as you can into the shoulders forward. I notice that I'm able to take a little bit deeper of a breath, maybe rotating backwards. And if there's aches, pains, you can always modify in the way that feels right. You can always rotate your ankle in one direction and the other. Maybe even doing a few like hip circles in one direction and the other. What we're doing is just making contact and connection with parts of our bodies, not as separate from one another, but as a whole. Yeah, and you can do this anytime, anywhere. The next invitation is a practice called self-havening. And this one may or may not, you can decide where you want to place your hands if your skin is really irritated and itchy. But this practice begins with just gently rubbing the hands together, right? Slowing things down. I think our inclination would be to rub it up to friction, but I'm just going to invite us to slow things down, right? And as we're rubbing our hands together, right? The invitation is, where would we like to put these hands first? Yeah, on our face. The typical practice is just to sweep the hands across the forehead a few times, noticing the temperature of your fingers, the pressure. Do you like more pressure or lighter pressure? Sweeping to the sides of your face, kind of from the center outward. Some people, there's that benefit of a little lymphatic movement here. And just gently sweeping down the face, across the jaw. It feels good. There's a few points right around the nose, just to release any tension. And as you sweep back out to the cheeks, giving a little love to these ears, right? Because there's vagus nerve has dense fibers in and around the ears, all around the helix and our lobes, the little tragus, and inside the concha, the bowl. I don't know if any of you have ever used a Q-tip in your ears and you're like, oh my God, that feels so good. That's because the ear is rich in vagus nerve fibers. A nice one is making fingers a V and in front and back of your ear and just gently massaging front and back, down to the neck. Yeah. And again, you can take these invitations. If it doesn't feel good, you don't have to do it. The next part of the practice is just contralateral, just doing a sweep or gentle arm squeezes, right? Sometimes when it's uncomfortable to be in our body, we disconnect. Doing little arm squeezes, little leg squeezes can remind us that we're still here, right? That it's okay. That maybe a self-hug, like, I got you. I got you. I find this one to be really helpful. Yeah. And the last invitation is just bringing your awareness to your breath, right? Just noticing your breath coming in through your nose, out through your mouth. And an extension of this practice is what we call the bird wing breath. And this really just kind of mimics the natural rhythm of our nervous system. So hand behind the head, when we take an in-breath, the chest naturally opens up. An inspiration. This is activation of the sympathetic nervous system. Our heart rate might actually speed up a little bit. That's expected. As we exhale through the mouth, right, we naturally contract. So we can kind of overemphasize that by inhale, opening the wings, exhale, closing the wings. Inhale, opening our wings. Exhale, closing the wings. If that hurts your arms, you can always let that go. Maybe putting a hand heart center, one on your belly. And you're just really allowing the body to breathe itself. Inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth, with the belly soft and relaxed. You're not trying to change anything. You're not trying to force anything. You're just inviting the body to settle into its own rhythm. And with the body taking in breath, and with the belly soft and relaxed, it's an invitation for the rest of your muscles to relax as well. Breathing in through your nose, out through your mouth. You can continue that kind of bird wing movement if it feels right, or you can just let it go. Maybe just taking a few more breaths in that way. And then just coming back into your individual space, When you're ready, just wiggling your fingers, wiggling your toes, and before kind of looking back at the screen, just orienting back into your own space, taking in the textures, colors, shapes that offer a little bit of comfort, making sure you're offering yourself that resource before you turn your attention back to the collective space, right? That may not be as familiar, that may not offer as much comfort. So you're creating what we call a resource, right? Little glimmers for yourself that can act as anchors in situations that may not feel as comfortable or safe, right? You're offering yourself cues of safety before you have to be in maybe a quote unquote unsafe situation. Okay. So I just would love to hear maybe how that was for you. If you noticed any maybe challenges in doing those practices, or if anything shift or felt helpful, or if you want more tools, we got lots more that I can share, but I would just love to hear how that experience was. Any questions? The floor is yours.
Lots more would be great. This takes me back to your first question, which was, are you the person with eczema or the caretaker? And these exercises remind me that I live as if I am taking care of a sick old lady, and I do a good job because that's survival and that's, what I need to do. But she is not me. And when I do these things, I remember, oh yeah, she's me. She is me. I am her. Um, so moving back into the body, something I've been sick for a long time, and something I've noticed is that I move out of my body. I live in my head, and my head directs me to take care of my body, but I am not living in my body. So thank you. More tools, yes.
I first of all, I just want to I really appreciate you sharing that, because that is such a common, so many of us do that, especially when we're living with a chronic condition like eczema that is associated with pain and itch. And I personally still struggle with gut issues, right? That idea of like I can't metabolize and digest all the emotions, right? I do this work because, quite frankly, I need to do this work. I too would love to eject right out of my body into my head because it feels safer, yeah. But when we remember the vast majority of what is helping our functionality is coming from the body to the brain, it is a nice reminder that, oh yeah, everything is connected. Oh yeah, I could involve my body in this, and maybe I could give my brain a break. We go into our brain because we do think it's safer. We can intellectualize, we can make sense of things. Sometimes we misinterpret the cues that we're getting, yeah? So a lot of these tools, especially if you are inclined to leave your body, right? That's going into the basement. We disassociate. Again, no wrong state. At some point in your life, and most of the time for many of us, this is when we're very young in our developmental stages, we had to do that. We had to do that because otherwise we might have gotten punished, yelled at, for whatever reason. There was a good reason for it. But now, fast forward, as adults, we don't necessarily need to default to that, but we haven't upgraded the software, right?
Mhm.
So the body can help us do that. So when you find that you're out of your body, grounding techniques. So when I invited us at the very beginning to find our feet on the floor for you, you might even notice that doing some heel raises, right? Going up on your toes, letting your heels drop. Standing up on your toes and letting your heels drop. Just reminding yourself, I'm here, I'm present, I'm being held, right? And those arm squeezes, touching the body, squeezing the body, reminding, I got you, I am here, right? Just making that contact and that connection is a very, for many of us, inaccessible, not too, right? You're not asking too much. You're just reminding yourself, like, oh, yeah, it's not that I am the same person taking care of and living with. So,
Yes.
so
And it's
thank you.
not always just like family or childhood trauma. Illness, in my experience, is a fearsome bully.
Mhm.
Chronic illness is itself a bullying entity in our lives. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
And on top of that, the medical system that you have to engage with,
Ugh.
all the poking and the prodding and the anticipatory anxiety, and then maybe having caregivers who just don't get it. They don't get you, you don't feel seen, you don't feel heard. And then that is a whole nother ball, right? So it's like, right, this is why we know with skin issues in particular, right? Stressors in all different forms, right? Whether it's environmental, it's emotional, it's physical, it's physiological, it's all the things combined. Um, we know that they can trigger flares, they can also keep them going, right? So how do we buffer some of that? How do we can't get rid of stress, nor would we want to, right? Because there's different types of stress. Like this is a stress. You showing up today is a stressor. You had to be here on time. You have to pay attention. But it's the kind of stress that we would label as eustress, good stress, the kind of
Mhm.
stress that we want to engage with versus the distress of having to go to the doctor and getting yet another biopsy or blood test or infusion or whatever you have to do, right? That creates a little worry, but it's still stress that we get to engage with and figure out, okay, how can I resource myself? What are the things that'll help my elevator be able to glide with more fluidity and flexibility? And it doesn't require you to meditate for an hour or do yoga for a retreat and a weekend. It could be literally picking your favorite mug or having an environment, right? Like, do you have a cozy pillow, a weighted blanket, a plant that you can just admire, or a pet, or a song, a playlist, something that you can just lean into at any time that really just reminds you, like, okay, I have some agency here, even when there are things about my health, about my life, about the world that I cannot control.
Oh, let's say 40 plants.
Oh wow, I love that. Okay, I need to sign up for like a workshop with you because as much I love plants, I tend to kill everything. So I have a lot of admiration for your garden. Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
I'm
Oh my
largely
goodness.
housebound, so I've created sort of an indoor jungle.
Yes. Oh, amazing, amazing.
Dog or cat would be nicer, but allergies, so we go with the plants.
Yeah, plants, I would imagine lower maintenance. Well, although some are pretty high maintenance. Thank you for sharing all of that. I see Susan commented that the practices were helpful. The one that felt restricted for me was the winged breathing, right? I think this is because it invites us to be more expansive in space. And growing up with eczema, my default was to close my body and try not to be noticed by others. Maybe that would be a good one for me to experiment with more. Susan, I appreciate you sharing. That takes a lot of courage to share something like that. And yes, I would imagine, right? Having to make yourself small, having to not have your voice be heard, right? And so when it comes to doing a practice like this, we can only move as fast as our nervous system is able to. We can't push it. Otherwise, it sends a cue of danger. Like, we might do it once. And we're like, I could do it. And then all of a sudden you want to go back into like close down mode. So maybe it's just maybe allowing your spine to elongate with every breath, like, right? As you exhale and you close down with the inhale, it's almost like a furling, or like Legos. If you've got kids, like stacking up Legos, like your spine is like right? One stacking on top of the other. And then if it feels accessible or safe enough, if you want, you could add the arms in, or you don't even have to, right? You just do what feels safe enough, safe enough. So thank you for sharing. Um, okay, what you're saying about the environment is very interesting. I'm struggling with a lot. Seeing any environment as a threat that might worsen the pain and pain and itch, allergies. Do you have any advice for that? Is it like Marie, is it the concern about physical allergens, like something that air filter might help with, or something completely different?
No, you're right. And I do like, I feel like my apartment is allergy proofed or eczema proofed or whatnot. I have everything you could advise, but it still feels like even going outside is a big deal. And, there were the forest fires like maybe a week ago. And I don't know, just like wind or my bed, is it clean enough? Like everything feels like a threat. So you were talking about the environment and like, oh, picking your perfect mug. And it's like, I don't know. I really identify with that. And I just wish I could feel less like the whole, like everything around me was a threat. Obviously, there's like a therapy aspect to that, but even just physically, I'm not sure what to do about it.
Yeah. So the invitation is, right? Like, what might you be able to add to your current environment that might help offer even just a little bit more felt sense of safety? Is it having like something that you keep in your pocket, like a special stone that you can hold on to when you leave, and like that's you know that you got you, right? Or in your house, is it a having different textures and colors that are soothing? Or if it's not a physical object because you're worried about the materials it might be made of, is it a slideshow of something that you can look at that allow your eyes to settle, right? Our eyes are intimately connected to our nervous system, and what we take in our visual environment can make a significant impact. So the colors, the textures, also what we look at on social media, the books that we read, the things on our bookshelf, all of these things we often don't think about. Things that we hear is having a white noise machine or just background music that's soothing. There's a lot of Dr. Stephen Porges who developed the polyvagal theory. Everything that I'm sharing with you is applied polyvagal theory. He also created something called the Safe and Sound Protocol. And this has been studied in all different populations, but especially individuals on the spectrum, the autistic spectrum, with significant results, right? Because there tends to be a hyper acute, like a hypervigilance in those systems, right? And when we're living with a chronic illness, our system is kind of, on alert, high alert. And it's the different tones and the frequencies. When we always think we're picking up cues of danger, our hearing is only attuned to certain frequencies and sounds, like the low growl. We can't always hear the sing-song quality. The Safe and Sound Protocol is a series, it's several weeks of listening to music, sometimes for seconds, sometimes it expands to minutes, but to help us kind of stimulate that vagus nerve that sends signals then to the brain to bring more regulation into the nervous system. So it's a different access point to creating a felt sense of safeness. Yeah. So that may be something, even if you don't want to do the Safe and Sound Protocol, even on YouTube, there are healing frequencies like the 528 hertz and lots of different background sounds that could be soothing. So the beautiful thing is that options are infinite. And it's kind of, I always tell my clients, it's like going to a buffet. There's lots of choices, and you're going to pick something off and you're going to try it on, and you might taste it. You're like, I don't want to go back for a second. Cool, but at least you know about it, right? And at some point, right time, right tool, it may come in handy. So
Dr. Barr, I want to thank you so much. That was wonderful. And I want to thank everybody for coming. I hate to cut it a little bit short, but people need this Zoom link. They need their meeting room. They're texting me saying, are you guys done? So I'm going to end us here, but that was incredible. But I will send out a recording of this as soon as I get that put together. And I'll send out the information again where people can reach you directly, Dr. Barr. Thank you, everybody, so much. We'll
Thank
see you in a
you.
couple.
Thanks.
Bye,
Thank
guys.
you.
Bye.
That was